Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq, with daily insight on the Nasdaq-100 index, or the NDX, which is made up of 100 of the largest domestic and international non-financial innovative companies listed on the Nasdaq stock market. The NDX has been the barometer for U.S. large cap growth and also one of the best performing indexes over the last decade and a half, not to mention one of the most liquid index ecosystems in the world. Joining me this Thursday afternoon, we have Joyce, Managing Director on Nasdaq's Market Intelligence Desk, for an update on technical levels to watch in the Nasdaq-100. Brian, what are you taking a look at today? Has much changed since we last met on Monday?
Yeah, I mean, so on Monday, we were just coming off a tough week last week. And so we were cautious about maybe how the near-term price action was going to look. Obviously, on the longer-term trend, things are looking great. But on the near term, we had some volatility, some pullback amongst various groups in the market. So the concern was, was the downside going to continue? So the Nasdaq-100 has rebounded. As you can see here, this is a 30-minute period chart. We filled the gap that we were looking at, which is an expected resistance level. We're still kind of waffling around there along the top of the gap and the all-time high, which is made just in the last week of January. But we're within 1% of the all-time high. So I mean, you can't be too bearish, on that note. When we zoomed out a little bit on the daily time frame, we could see today's high, we're up almost 1% on the day, is almost identical to the top from last week. And then we actually hit that yesterday. And we then sold off and closed at the end, at the bottom of yesterday's range. So a bit of a bearish candlestick pattern here on the short-term time frame. We're up again today. So this is the new risk level to kind of trade against, depending on what your time frame is. The all-time high, 13,564. Potential here for a double top if this is a topping pattern. But again, that would be pretty early call to make to get too bearish here. But there are some signs here that maybe we should think about in the near term. We talked about the breadth on Monday. It's fading. The number of stocks traded above the 50-day moving average peaked back in early January. So did the number of 52-week highs peaked back in early January, and it's been trending lower. So you want to see that kind of improve as the index is making new highs. We looked at the semiconductors as well. We noted that bearish candlestick last week. It engulfed the prior 2 weeks. This week, it's higher, it's up, but it's still in the midpoint of last week's range. So it still has some work to do. And then separately, looking at other asset classes, we look at the dollar this month. It's up over 1%. And we have a chart here. This is a daily period chart of the dollar. It's clearly been in a downtrend. If we put our trend line here, we could see it did break this trend line back in November before we zoom into the downside. Risk assets typically do well with a declining dollar. We can see it's broken this downtrend line again and is now moving higher. And it's kind of broken out of this little bottoming pattern here as well. So it'll be interesting to see what the dollar does from here. In the past, when the dollar was higher in September and October, the Nasdaq-100 was down those 2 months. So it's not the strongest correlation, but certainly something just I would say keep an eye on. The NDX is, like we said earlier to start out, it's up against, it's almost its all-time highs within 1%. So I don't want to get too bearish, but something to keep in mind. Maybe we could see a little bit more corrective price action if we can't get through this 13,564 level, which was the prior all-time high.
All right, Brian, appreciate the insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks, and thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq.
Thanks for having me.